Officials now say 7 people have been killed by the outbreak of E. coli in Walkerton, Ontario, and they warn it could be as many as 9.
Walkerton is a small community in rural southern Ontario, up near the Bruce Peninsula. They're a modest little community, sporting a population of about 5,000. They have their own hockey teams, their own schools, their own accomplishments. They're very much like us in a lot of ways, which is what makes the events that shook the town and the province in May of 2000 all the more grasping. Here's what happened. It's May 12, 2000, and the rainy season has just hit Ontario. One would think nothing of it, just another spring rainstorm. This torrential weather becomes problematic, however, when you examine the state of Walkerton's water utilities. Walkerton utilized a system of numbered wells which were overseen by the Walkerton Public Utilities Commission ever since their construction in the 1970s. On paper, this sounds like your average, respectable municipal bureaucracy. In practice, things become more complicated. The Public Utilities Commission is headed by Stan Coble. Stan Coble was not an expert in water safety. He was a career yes-man who inherited his certifications and his position as water manager through years with the Public Utilities Commission. Coble's lack of knowledge in up-to-date drinking water legislation and basic maintenance of utilities reflected in his Public Utilities Commission. The one thing that the Coble Commission could absolutely not be bothered to do was to sample the water from its wells. Crucial samples that should have been taken were those for microbiological testing and those for chlorine levels in its filtration systems. The Commission was comically terrible at doing either. They would take fewer samples than regulations mandated, filling in the ones they didn't take with falsified results. Their wells on a good day would run with slightly less chlorine than was mandated by regulations, and some run with no chlorine whatsoever. This gets worse when you look at the conditions of the wells that Walkerton was drawing water from. The wells that supplied Walkerton were aptly named Well 5, Well 6, and Well 7. Number 5 had a known vulnerability in that it would absorb runoff water from the surface, and as such, the water had to be constantly sent in for a microbiological sample. Well 7 had a notable problem with its own chlorine levels being constantly inadequate to safely filter the water. To summarize the exact situation in Walkerton, the town's water supply is run by lazy cronies. One well is susceptible to contamination from surface runoff, and the other well can't filter. And Walkerton is about to receive an exponential amount of rainfall and surface runoff. You can already tell how this is going to turn out. Escherichia coli is a bacteria found in the digestive systems of certain animals, including mammals. E. coli is not inherently harmful to humans. However, there are strains of the bacteria that can be deadly. Walkerton, being a rural agricultural town, happened to have a number of farms in and around the area. When rainstorms and heavy flooding hit the area in early May of 2000, it is suspected that a deadly strain of E. coli was located in the manure of cows that had been spread in the area. This contaminated the runoff water, which made its way into Walkerton's inadequately prepared wells. A few days after the storms, on May the 15th, the Commission sends off their water samples to be tested as per usual. 2 days later, on the 17th, they get the results back. The samples are found to contain E. coli bacteria. This information remains undisclosed. The same day, the first cases of E. coli poisonings are reported. This is the beginning of the outbreak for Walkerton. In the days after May 17th, numerous patients are reporting the symptoms of E. coli poisoning, ranging from cramps, headaches, and fever to both regular and bloody diarrhea. 2 people have died from seemingly loosely related causes, a 92-year-old woman and a 69-year-old man. Less and less students are showing up to school by the day. Tensions are rising within the community, but Stan Coble assures everyone that the water supply is not contaminated. Public health officials are monitoring the situation and find the Commission's track record to be worrying. They take their own samples of the water from the wells, and on May 23rd it is officially confirmed that the water supply is contaminated with E. coli bacteria. While hospitals fills up and more people die, the public are advised not to drink the tap water. The Commission are forced to admit the cover-up and fraudulent activity that allowed the outbreak to reach the levels it has, and official E. coli deaths begin to be counted. All in all, this outbreak will claim the lives of 6 people, the bulk of whom represent the immunocompromised, young children and the elderly. On May 25th, the Medical Officer for Health in Walkerton, Dr. Murray McQuigg, announces to the public that the Commission has been hiding the source of the outbreak. The police begin a subsequent investigation into the Commission. At this point, reported cases are in the hundreds and hospitals are overwhelmed. The provincial government, the public health offices, law enforcement, and the public have their attention shined onto the outbreak in Walkerton. As information becomes public, information that Stan Cobles kept this vital information to himself, and that the Commission had been running their wells in a way that allowed this to happen, outrage began to materialize. While all this is happening, people all around the province begin to worry about their water supplies. Could what happened in Walkerton happen here, they asked themselves? In the chaos, public facilities such as schools and churches remained closed until further notice. A state of emergency had been declared, and a plan to contain the contamination had been drawn up by Stan Cobles and the engineers from a local contracting firm. It was estimated by officials that the water from the wells would not be safe to drink for another 6 weeks, and so the crisis would continue. At the end of it all, 2,300 cases were counted. 6 officially lost their lives in the crisis, with total unaccounted for deaths being estimated to have reached 11. In 2001, a year later, the people of Walkerton, including those who had been exposed to the bacteria and those whose relatives had died in the outbreak, are entitled to compensation of $2,000 or more depending on how the crisis affected them personally, by the provincial government. In addition to this, a number of government subsidies were made to the community, to its utilities, and to its residents over the course of the crisis. Life would slowly return to normal in Walkerton, but the outbreak would forever cloud the settlement's history and its image. Stan Coble, having been removed from his managerial position at the Public Utilities Commission upon its disbanding, received $84,000 in severance pay. He would go on to be tried for charges of common nuisance, to which he pled guilty. He spent a year in prison, served his jail time, and fell out of the public eye. And as with time, so did the horrible outbreak that had took place under his watch.